going to talk about government technology in a second. I'm curious if anybody here has thought about government technology. Yeah. So obviously we all interact with local governments. We're all part of several of them at least. And I think what we want to talk about here is how governments are extremely large, complicated organizations, and by many different pieces of technology. Angela and I mostly focused on software, but government also buys plenty of hardware technologies as well. And so we're going to talk a little bit about government technology just as a market, as an opportunity, as something that you all as developers and people who are interested in technology might be interested in, either as a professional or through. There's a long history of civic technologists who volunteer time to help local governments.
And maybe one thing that may help a little bit is there's kind of two sides to this equation. One side is you actually go into working with the government, right? The other side is you're a private industry and you're helping governments with technology solutions. And that's what we're here to talk about today. We work with governments and they all have IT departments and they all have their own, mostly, especially the larger ones, their own set of developers and IT teams. But all of them, just like in the last presentation, are desperately in need of help from the private sector to help keep up with the trends and most certainly provide the type of services that we all expect as constituents of governments. We expect governments to work just like when we go to the bank or when we get on the airplane or when we order an Amazon package, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's important to keep talking about the kind of scope here. Governments interact with technology at every level, from, sewers to drones, from parks to business licensing. And at every step of the way, either government people on the back end are frustrated by data, processes, information not being communicated properly or things not happening efficiently, or us, I assume, is there anybody who works for the government here? I got one state employee. Okay. Oh, cool. Maybe. And so, most of us in this room then interact with government when we want to, say, get a business license or pay taxes or interact with a county clerk or something like that. And all of those interactions are places where friction can happen, and technology is often used as a way to reduce that friction, make things easier both for us and for people on the back end. All right. So, do you want to lead off with this one?
Sure. I've made my entire career, 20 plus years, working in government technology, and it's been incredible. And the reason why I say that is because it's mission driven. You can do really well financially, but you also can really thrive knowing that you are living out a mission to make the world a better place. And I like to think of it as, how do I help build safe communities? And so my experience in government technology has really been around economic development and growth. How do you have thriving communities? But then also, how do you ensure you have the services like schools, like libraries, like hospitals, all of the different aspects, good water, healthy air, all of these things that are absolutely essential and important, parks, recreation, all of these things that help communities thrive. And government needs solutions to help track and ensure that they can really become this sort of entity that folks want to do business with and want to live and thrive. And so because of that, government technology has become really, really hot. Private equity investors as well as venture capitalists are really interested in this market for these reasons. Number one, governments typically don't adopt new software every other day. Once they buy, they kind of stick with it for like, Gartner says 10 years. It's really more like 20. So once you get in, you're golden, right? And these folks really are just desperate to have people that know the domain and have expertise in technology help them. In addition to that, government right now is going through a digital transformation. We saw this, many of you may not remember, some of you will, back in 2000, what was called Y2K. Everybody had to have a new system because everybody was afraid their systems were going to completely fall apart if they didn't update to 4 characters. And now we saw this happen with COVID. COVID was a huge driver. All of a sudden, people needed to be able to license sidewalk cafes. They needed to continue to do business with their governments, even if governments weren't going into the office. SaaS growth, you can think of it. I mean, government technology is just like any private sector SaaS offering. It's the exact same thing, the exact same principles. So everything you would do in a non-Govtech SaaS company, you would do in a SaaS company. And then we talked about the Amazon effect, and certainly just folks are desperate for modern software. And we didn't mention cybersecurity, but believe it or not, cybersecurity, ransomware is real in government, and it is the #1 issue on all CIO, Chief Information Officers' minds. So they all want to move to the cloud because they believe, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, that if they're operating in the cloud, they're much safer because people like Google, people like Oracle have the ability to actually maintain and advance their software easier than a random CIO sitting in Lexington, Fayette, Urban County government who has a million different priorities and an election coming up, right?
Yeah,
so these are all things that we think about.
Or at least if they get hacked, they can fire their Amazon rep and not the CIO.
Good point. Excellent point, Nick. That is true.
And yeah, I skipped my background. So I run a nonprofit that runs a startup accelerator for government technology companies. We mostly focus on software. And then we also work with local government leaders themselves and help them try and even just like think about technology. So, you know, the crazy truth about it is that if you're New York or LA and you probably have enough money and staff to do a lot of in-house development, and they certainly do there as well, they get tons of inbounds from all these cutting edge technologies and ways that they could really improve their services. If you're a medium-sized city like Lexington, you probably get a lot of inbounds, but it's, you don't have the time to sift through that. You don't have the time to like look through that. So what we try and do is keep an eye on the market and be a trusted advisor for governments, and then help governments or bring governments into the fold to help guide what startups come into our accelerator. So this is kind of our pitch for why you should think about Govtech as well. So we talked a lot, we've hit on a lot of these points already, but Govtech is like a really unique, challenging, and full of opportunity market. So for one, I think a lot of people go to learn to become developers, or maybe go to business school, want to start a business, want to get into programming. Nobody's really talking about like government as a pathway for that. And I think it's a real missed opportunity, because a lot of people want to make a lot of impact in their business, in their programming. And certainly you all are here because you're interested in kind of coming together around some of the developing work that you're doing. And I think government technology is a really excellent opportunity to do that kind of social impact work. Some of the challenging components on it, or one of the big opportunities, it's a huge market. I mean, multiple trillions of dollars just in state and local technology in the United States alone are spent on various technology and software services every year. On the other hand, every customer is really different. So it's a highly differentiated market, right? Like each government, I used to work at the National Association of Counties in Washington, D.C., and we used to say, if you know one county, you know one county. And it's really like every county has their own ways of doing things. They all have their 14 systems, but a different 14 systems, or a different combination of those things. on the, from a, a developer or a business owner perspective, really low churn. 20 years. So once you get in, if they trust you and you're delivering on your work, it's going to be really hard for them to move away from you because they have 100 other priorities to do at any given time. On the other hand, that means they're going to really take their time trying to identify the right technology to do that, or they're going to go with like the really well-known players. So that's a kind of the opposite side of that. I think another underutilized thing is, everyone lives in a local government who's really interested in promoting local businesses, often technology businesses that are scalable and have potential to grow. You have this ideal product design customer who's really invested in your success. If you're thinking about launching a product, helping, we just brought on a new company that helps parks manage their reservation systems. This is kind of there's so many opportunities in this for low lift, small improvements that could really help governments. On the other hand, if you're trying to raise venture capital, it is a challenging time for any venture capital right now, and investors are particularly undereducated around government technology as an opportunity, which is part of why what we do through our accelerator. And then last, I think this is a little bit of everything, unique, challenging, and an opportunity, but price is really not a differentiator. So if you're coming in as a new startup company, you can't just say, hey, we're going to do the same thing but cheaper than someone else, because government just doesn't have the same kind of price discipline as like a business or a consumer might have. And so you really have to say, hey, we're doing it 10 times better than the other people, because the 8 times of that work is going to be going through a procurement process on their end. And if you're not worth going through the headache of a procurement process, it's going to be a headache for you too, then it's not going to be worth it for them to go through that. Anything to add on the unique? All right, we covered a lot. Oh, so these are, I added a bunch of logos, but I think Angela probably has a lot to add on this slide as well, about who's doing it well, what kinds of companies, what kinds of startups, what kind of technologies are people doing.
Yeah, I'll just add a few, which is most of the bigs, like Salesforce, for example, Oracle, Workday, they all have public sector practices. And so they're all, Amazon, like they have a huge public sector group now that actually just formed about 3 years ago, believe it or not. Google, all of the bigs are very, very interested in figuring out how can they get into the public sector. It is unique. It does take patience. And so, my experience over 20 years has been like you kind of see this curve, and it's like sometimes they're really interested and then they kind of back down. Sometimes they're really interested and they kind of back down. Right now, they're really, really interested in government technology. And though VC, yes, funding is hard to get. I will say that, we're hearing of private equity firms acquiring GovTech companies far more often than previously. So there's usually about 1 to 3 transactions per quarter. And these aren't small transactions. These transactions are, there was one that just paid 10x at $1 billion. It was considered a unicorn. So, this is like a really exciting time, even though the economy is, it just all depends on the product market fit. And so really having that use case that can go up market and be wide is really important. I had the pleasure of actually working with my last gig with Mark Andreessen Horowitz, which was very, very cool. John Chambers from Cisco, Amy Pressman, you may know her. She, Medallia, it's an awesome customer feedback for like hotels and things like this. And these folks were like, how can I sign up with a government technology company? I want in that market. So it's really kind of fascinating to see how far it's come since I started back, pre-Y2K. So yes, I would strongly encourage anyone that's interested in either starting a company or potentially working as a programmer. Silicon Valley companies are looking, they'll pick you up even if you're located in Lexington, Kentucky. I've been operating as a remote executive now for 15 years for Silicon Valley companies. And it's just been so incredible. And I just encourage everyone to explore whatever, if you're an entrepreneur or just want to be a programmer and do your thing and have flexible hours.
Yeah, and there's lots of former government officials who have great ideas for how to improve things, but don't have the development skills. So those would be great people to partner with. And just, to go through, I won't go through what all these companies do, but I think they kind of point to a couple clear lessons for like how people should approach. So, Quali and Yline are two companies that were they launched right before COVID, and they met a clear need, helping local businesses and reducing the amount of people waiting in close quarters in lines for government services, airports, things like that. As you can see, Yline got acquired by Clear. So the second group of Polymorphic and Kaizen, I think they're really like large scope, kind of what Angela was talking about, but they're really spending a lot of time on the road, meeting government people all over the United States and doing deep customer listening and kind of just using their development know-how to spin up custom versions of their products all over the place. And then later on they can do some kind of consolidation. And then the last but not least, we have Daylight and Waterly, who I think are two people who are like really cut the issue really small. Waterly just takes all the time that people in water utilities were doing with a clipboard, walking around, writing down water pressure, water quality information at different stations of water utility, and then they would take that clipboard, give it to someone else, and they would put it into Excel and just kind of automates all that. And so they just did one small thing really well, and they probably saved every utility that they sell this product into hundreds of hours a month for doing it. So those are kind of three different strategies that I've seen work in the space. Okay, coming towards the end here. Again, pitching you all on how to get involved. So there's a couple different tips and tricks that we've learned from running this accelerator for almost 5 years now.
And how many companies have gone through SIP-Start's accelerator? Yeah,
so we have a very unique model because the government, like I said, the time to close is so long. So our accelerator program is actually a 24-month accelerator program. It's not as intense as some of the traditional really intensive 1-month programs or something. So I think we've had about 50-ish companies come through, a little over 50 at this point.
Can you tell approximately how many got to Series A or?
Yeah, I'd say
beyond. I don't know.
I think we've helped raise over $300 million for the startups in our cohorts, and I think over 75% have at least doubled their ARR, their annual recurring revenue, while they were a part of our cohort.
That's awesome. Congrats, Nick.
So if any of you are aspiring to start a business, start a Govtech business, these are some different ways that we might suggest doing that. So one is customer research. As I mentioned, you're already part of several customers already. You're very invested product development people. Find investors who are willing to learn and be patient. The market can take a while to get traction. Once you get traction, or if you find the kind of issue, or honestly, just if the federal funding landscape changes. Cybersecurity, there's a ton of federal funding coming down the pipeline for cybersecurity right now. But sometimes you start a company and then all of a sudden it becomes really big. Someone starts a parks management company and all of a sudden wildfires are really important in California and this company will blow up. So finding investors who get the mission is important, we found. This is a little technical, but we generally encourage early startups to avoid RFPs unless you helped write them.
Request for proposal. So a lot of governments have to go out to bid and then people have to respond, which is a big pain. But guess what? There's some awesome new technology out there that allows for this bidding process to be streamlined and much more efficient. There are a lot of loopholes to this, though, so don't let it detract you. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you want to talk about actually the next point? I bet you have maybe some specific examples about building a case study and champions.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that every government is really eager for someone to walk in the door and say, hey, I have an idea, and I'd love to just kind of talk to you a little bit, interview, and find out how I can help your government be more efficient. And they're all willing to tell you how many ways you can make them more efficient, and then you can easily like grab an idea and say, hey, can I pilot this with you? And they'll absolutely say sure. And then after that, you write a case study about it, and then you ask them to be a reference and a champion for you. And 9 times out of 10, as long as you do them right, they will absolutely do you right.
This is also a little technical, but identifying the decision maker, purchaser, and user for your product. Unlike in many markets, they are probably not the same person in a local government. And there's probably other people who need to be involved as well. And then our shameless plug is join our CivStart boot camp, which is like a very low-level product. If you take an idea, want to launch a company, we're happy to kind of help support you all.
Definitely not a shameless plug.
Oh, yeah.
I want in. Let's go.
Yeah, all right. And that's the presentation. So our shameless plug for you all to think about building a company, or at least a peek into the hidden abode of government technology.
Okay, let's be honest. Real quick poll. Who had any aspirations of government technology before this presentation?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Awesome.
It's a good audience.
Any new ones now after hearing this? Kind of, maybe.
There we go.
Okay, awesome. We got a few yeses. Okay.
Yeah, maybe we'll start a local Code for America brigade at the very least, you know.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, you all.